Ballycastle, County Antrim. For many it's the Old Lammas Fair or a day trip during the summer. But for those of us who grew up here during the 50s and 60s, it was a very special place all the year round. We even knew it at the time. We really had two little towns to belong to, each with its own character. The market town and the seaside resort, joined together by a graceful tree-lined avenue open to the hills at one side. The sun didn't shine every day, but it appeared often enough to keep us happy. Part of Unionist Ulster and part of Nationalist Ireland, Ballycastle never fully gave its allegiance to either. Perhaps it was the influence of the Scottish Highlands and Islands which filled our horizons. The writ of Stormont never entirely ran here, while Dublin was further away than Edinburgh. When winter storms from the Atlantic Ocean swept across the bay, cutting off the harbour to all shipping, the flimsy power lines came down and blizzards blocked the roads. We got out the candles, the paraffin and the tilly lamps and functioned perfectly well as an almost self-contained community. We took pride in our fine schools, which unfortunately were to educate so many of us for export. We were taught our local history, even if it wasn't on the curriculum. We heard about times of glory and of shame, of Donaghini Castle on the cliff top, its name perhaps indicating the original site of the Lammas Fair, of the bloody massacre in 1565 on the slopes of Knocklade, when Shane O'Neill, with the connivance of Queen Elizabeth, attempted to drive the MacDonalds back to Scotland, and of the destruction of Bunnamargy Friary by the same MacDonalds almost 20 years later when they tried to eject the occupying English troops. We knew the stories of Julia McQuillan, the Black Nun of Bunnamargy. On dark winter's nights, our bicycles sped past to the sound of plain chant as the wind blew through the telephone wires. We were proud to know also the secrets of our town's golden age. From 1736, Colonel Hugh Boyd, whose father had been the local rector, transformed the tiny village around the castle, sited near to the present town church, and the nearby even smaller fishing hamlet of Margytown into one of the largest industrial complexes in Ireland, based on the extensive coal seams nearby. He diverted two rivers to allow construction of a fine enclosed harbour on the site of the tennis courts, capable of holding up to 40 ships, with an extended quay alongside for loading and unloading. An outer harbour provided a safe approach and anchorage, and the narrow channel between the basins was crossed by a lifting bridge. A wooden wagonway used in the harbour construction was probably the earliest railway in Ireland. It was later extended to the colliery using a bridge over the Margy River. His enterprises included a salt works at the Pans Rocks, coal mines, a brewery, ironworks, soap works, bleach works, tannery, weaving sheds, several watermills, an inn, and a huge conical kiln on Glass Island for the manufacture of crown glass and bottles. So much trade was done in the port that a customs house was opened. Hugh Boyd, who built his manor house on the quayside in the midst of his enterprises, had an interest in architecture and may have designed his own church, Holy Trinity on the Diamond. Sadly for Ballycastle, he died in 1765. Without his drive and control, most of the industries soon failed. The ships departed and the harbour silted up. Some prosperity returned in the next century, with the town becoming a market and trading centre for the surrounding area. Completion of the coast road helped to bring tourists to the new hotels. Quarrying and export of iron ore and stone continued, with several substantial piers being constructed around the coast. Ballycastle limestone had a high reputation as a building material and was used in the facades of Mussenden Temple, Downhill Castle and many other fine buildings. coal mining continued. But as the best seams became exhausted, the coal got a bad reputation for slate content. Many of the mines were very wet, requiring expensive pumping. And there was always a danger to miners of roof collapse. By 1950, 6 mines were left, the last closing in 1964. Over a period, the ships which once exported coal from Ballycastle began to import it, sometimes along the coast from the bigger harbours at Portrush and Coleraine. These ships were unloaded at a new pier onto motor lorries belonging to Nicholl's coal and timber yard. This was also served by a private track off the narrow gauge railway line from Ballymoney, which had opened in 1880. The siding from the coal yard to the station was so steep that 2 winchmen were needed to raise and lower the trucks. The railway formed the principal link with the outside world for many years and helped to bring in tourists. But the fact that the track had been laid to a different gauge than the main lines meant that it was not possible to run through excursion trains from Belfast, so the large crowds went to Portrush instead. The sturdy little tank engines coped well with the steep gradients on the line, and the carriages, which had centre corridors, framed pictures and deep padded seats, were the most luxurious on any Irish narrow gauge railway. The last trains ran on this line in July 1950, and for 4 years afterwards it became our adventure playground. We didn't damage anything because we hoped that somebody would make it all work again. But it wasn't to be. One day a lot of men came down from the city and cut up our railway. They told us that the rails were going to India. That didn't make us feel any better. But we were young and lived in the present, so we found somewhere else to play. For our parents, the winter months before the visitors arrived weren't all relaxation. On calm days, some fishing was possible, and much-needed provisions could be sent to the pier to be picked up by the Rathlin Islanders, who'd often undergone long periods of isolation. Work also continued on the farms. The people of the town were given a taste of this in the horse-ploughing competition held each February in the fields close by. We didn't always understand what we were looking at, but we loved the big, powerful horses, always so beautifully groomed. We occasionally had uninvited visitors, cast-ups from the winter storms. Social activities in the winter centred round the churches, but in addition to parochial activities, many other events were open to all. In the Key Road Hall, Frank McCollum's Fiddler's Nights were not to be missed, nor were the whist drives, plays, and even opera. Dances were held here and in the Orange Hall. Among many events, the McAllister Hall hosted Macbeth and Hamlet from a new McMaster's touring company. Television reception was poor, so the cinema did good business, with the best seats at 1 and 9p. The energetic among us played hockey or hurling on wind-swept pitches high above the town. For others, it was more important to keep warm. There wasn't much traffic on the roads, so as the days warmed up in the spring, whole families went for long Sunday walks. We really knew that the season had arrived when the circus came to town. There was glamour and excitement on the screen at the pictures, and Shakespeare and Mozart were all right, but this was the real thing. We couldn't wait for the 4 o'clock matinee. We organised our own processions too, as when musicians Geordie Mackay and Adam Sloan led Father Park, who was being transferred to Larne after 13 years in Ballycastle, through the streets of the town. The children of the parish gave him a grand send-off. On another occasion, the threatened closure of Dalriada Hospital, which had served the community so well for many years, united the medical staff and townspeople in protest. Although the battle was won, the campaign was lost, as when it was eventually rebuilt, full general hospital facilities were no longer provided. We warmly welcomed home distinguished Ballycastle people who had found success in the world, such as Donal Lamont, here being greeted by Sister Marie and Canon McKinley. Dr. Lamont had been appointed Bishop of Umtali, Southern Rhodesia. The hardier visitors came early, some to the Holiday Fellowship Hostel at Coromila, which was later greatly expanded by voluntary effort to become a centre for Christian reconciliation under the Reverend Ray Davies' inspired leadership. In Hugh Boyd's old manor house, which had become a Dr. Bernardo's home, many children, some from a background of family tragedy, grew up happily by the seaside. Others had a more temporary stay as the caravans began to arrive. Visitors were always welcome, but some brought all their food with them and didn't go out much. There seemed to us to be more style in the mass invasion by the Scottish visitors on Upton's and Fawcett's coach tours. It lifted our spirits to see them arrive.
Here comes summer, school is out, a happy day. Here comes summer, I'm gonna grab my girl and run away. Here comes summer, oh, we'll go swimming every day. Let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home. Well, school's not so bad, but summer's better. Gives me more time to see my girl. Walks in the park neath the summer moon, and when we kiss, she makes my flat top curl. It's summer, I feel her lips so close to mine. Here comes summer, oh, when we meet our hearts entwine. It's the greatest. Let's have summer all the time, and let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home. Here comes summer, almost June, the sun is bright. Here comes summer, Driving movies every night, double features. Lots more time to hold her tight. Let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home. Well, I've a mind to hold my girl beside me, walk in the park till 1 or 2, sit by the lake neath the summer moon and dream of love whole night through. It's summer. She'll be with me every day. Here comes summer. I'll meet the gang at Joe's Cafe if she's willing. Or we'll go steady right away and let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home. Let the sun shine bright on my happy summer home.
Another sign of summer was the coming of the fun fair. In the 1920s it arrived on the Fair Hill to great excitement. Later it came with style and elegance to the pier yard. Then it moved again. Every June, McFarlane's Amusements arrived from their winter quarters near Omagh to become one of the town's foremost attractions on the seafront. We couldn't help spending our pocket money on the roundabouts and the roll-a-penny stall, while our mothers blew the housekeeping money in the hope of winning another vase or even a plastic bucket. The octopus wasn't for the feeble or the faint-hearted. The Strand Cafe was one of 3 owned by the Berticelli family. Their ice cream, made by Francis, was famous and brought to us a taste of the Neapolitan Riviera.
Volare, oh, oh, e cantare, oh, oh. No wonder my happy heart sings. Your love has given me wings. Nel blu dipinto de blu, venite di stare lassù. Nel blu dipinto di blu.
One day, Uncle Sam came to visit. The Betelgeuse, a nuclear resupply ship of the American Navy, made a courtesy call on one of its regular trips from the United States to the Holy Loch submarine base in Scotland. We weren't quite sure that it would be safe to visit the ship, but were tempted by the prospect of a trip in the wonderful high-speed launches. Hundreds made the trip in local boats as well. On board, we did our very best to start a small war, but fortunately the crew had hidden the shells. While ashore, some new friendships were made. It seemed there could be no end to the day's excitement, with our first sight of people skiing on water. And the RAF got in the act as well, with one of those little bubble helicopters which we had only seen before in magazines. One summer's day, the town councillors gathered at the boat slip for another unusual event. Bernard Sherlock had to check the watches carefully, as this was to be an attempt to establish a record for the difficult swim from Rathlin Island by the only man who might succeed, Jack McClelland. The 35-year-old swimmer was accompanied on Jack Coyle's boat by Dr. Humphreys as medical advisor, and, in case of shark attack, by 2 other local men armed with rifles. As we were all entertained by the band of the RUC, the start of the swim from Rathlin was signalled by firing of a rocket. In order to keep out the cold, Jack's body was insulated by 3 coatings of grease, and during the journey he drank some soup. Three hours and 8 minutes after leaving Rathlin, he waded ashore rather unsteadily to cheers from all of us, and a kiss from his wife. We had been told to expect a day of celebration, and we weren't disappointed. The sun shone brilliantly for one of the best fancy dress parades ever. While his father drove the jaunting car, a young apprentice butcher, Roland Wisner, escorted Hazel Dillon, his bride, for the day. As the commercial floats lined up along the seafront, prizes were distributed to the individual fancy dress entrants. And we all came out to applaud our hero of the day, Jack McClelland. Perhaps the RUC might not have been quite so keen on another event. We rolled out the barrels and had bicycle races where the winner travelled the shortest distance. But some of us had better things to do. One time, a would-be Houdini was even more tied up. We had ladies' football, where the footwork wasn't the only attraction. And American football, where everyone dashed about a lot, but we couldn't understand the rules. We were allowed to play tennis on the fine grass courts which occupied Hugh Boyd's old harbour, but were encouraged to make way for the real enthusiasts such as Theo Barnes, who played here for 60 years. In July, even he moved out for the County Antrim Grass Court Championships, which always seemed to share some of Wimbledon's atmosphere and weather. Also in July, we celebrated the 12th, but somehow marches never really attracted the crowds. For the Hibernian March on August 15th, the story was very similar. One day around this time, we were intrigued to see a stage being constructed outside Kate McClister's paper shop. It was there for the unveiling by singer Eileen Donaghy of a plaque to the memory of John Henry Macaulay, woodcarver and composer of the song The Ould Lammas Fair, which Eileen had made famous. We all came in the hope that she would sing for us after the speeches from the council. But like the staff of the Ann Street Cafe, we were amused when the sheet refused to fall away from the plaque.
At the Ould Lammas Fair in Ballycastle long ago, I met a pretty colleen who set my heart at low. She was smiling and her daddy buying lamb from Paddy Row. At the Ould Lammas Fair in Ballycastle, oh, I seen her home that night when the moon was shining bright. From the Ould Lammas Fair in Ballycastle, oh, at the Ould Lammas Fair, boys, were you ever there? Were you ever at the fair in Ballycastle? Oh, did you treat your Mary Ann to some dulce and yellow man at the Ould Lammas Fair in Ballycastle? Oh.
This is Ballycastle and the Ould Lammas Fair. People have come here from all over the province to attend this, the fair of the year. The stallholders have been up all night, and today the town is absolutely packed to capacity. But why listen to me? Come with our cameras and see for yourselves some of the highlights of this, the Ould Lammas Fair.
At the Ould Lammas Fair, boys, were you ever there? Were you ever at the fair in Ballycastle? Oh, did you treat your Mary Ann to some dulce and yellow man at the Ould Lammas Fair in Ballycastle? Oh. There's a neat little cabin near the slopes of Fawcett. It's lit by love and sunshine where the heather honey's made. But the bees ever humming and their children's joyous call resound across the valley as the shadows fall. I take my fiddle down and my Mary smiling there, bring back a happy memory of the Lammas Fair.
Where do you come from?
I come from near Portland.
Near Portland. Well, are you here in business or in pleasure?
I'm here trying to make money.
Trying to make money? Well, I hope you make plenty.
Ballycastle, oh,
Are you having a good time at the fair?
Yes, we're having a very good time.
Where do you come from?
From Belfast.
From Belfast? You're
Yes.
just down here for the day?
I'm down here for holidays.
Have you been ever at the fair before?
Yes, I haven't missed it for about 15
I
years.
suppose you'll do a hilly after this is over?
Oh, yes.
And,
I'm at holidays in Port Ballintree and I like to come across the Lammas Fair to see if everything's going well.
well, now, just
You
take
see.
care of yourself and have a
Thank you
good
very-
time.
Thank you very much.
Do you come to this fair every year?
No,
Where do you come from?
I come from Hunts of Quitting here and I make a sudden sorry and I sparkle out among the fairness to bigger down a valley.
Very nice indeed. Well, are you here in business or are you here in pleasure? I see you have a stick with you.
Just keep here.
You're here to make money.
And most of them they were there to make money and to renew friendships. The sale of sheep and cattle was still very important for them and for us. For days beforehand, the sound and smell of the livestock dominated the town, and the shopkeepers depended on the fair too,
You're a businessman in Ballycastle. Do you find that the Lammas Fair brings quite a bit of business to the town?
Oh yes, quite a good. The only thing we have to say about it is we do one of it once a month.
The churches, the makers of meat teas and the ice cream men would all have loved to see the visitors here once a month.
I met lots of interesting people here today. This gentleman with me now is all the way from Canada. What part of Canada are you from, sir?
Montreal, sir.
Are you enjoying your first visit to the fair?
Very much indeed. It's nice to see a place like Ballycastle continue to have this fair.
Have you bought any of the traditional dulce and yellow man to take back to Canada?
If I buy any more dulce and yellow man, the customs man won't let me in.
Might I ask you, sir, have you brought your wife with you?
That I haven't got, but I've seen a lot of pretty girls in Ballycastle. I might take one back with me.
Well, just be careful, sir, because with all these girls around, you never know what might happen. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hello, girls. Are you having a good time at the fair?
Yes.
Where do you come from? Ballycastle. You live in Ballycastle? Yeah. Suppose you're going to Hilly when this is all over.
Oh, no Hilly tonight.
No Hilly tonight? Well, that's too bad.
We would have plenty of time for our own hoolies later on when the visitors had gone. And in September and October, we often had the year's best weather too. Later on, the primary schools got holidays for potato picking. But harvest time saw some of us helping, or maybe hindering, the saving of the corn and the flax. Through the autumn and into the winter again, we settled down to our studies and to our work, sometimes in ways unchanged for centuries. We weren't to know that a few years hence the political upheavals in the province would forever alter our town and bring tragedy to some of its people. Perhaps some change would have happened anyway, and we cannot reverse the clock. But those of us who grew up in Ballycastle during the 50s and 60s were fortunate indeed.
Those were the days. Stay with us here on BBC One Northern Ireland for Food Fit for a Queen.